Welcome to the Growth Over Grades podcast, a show connecting you with thought leaders, pioneers, and change agents who are leading the charge to support schools and districts in making the shift toward competency-based education and to promote growth over grades. I'm Jordan Lewis, and on the show today, we hear from the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at America Succeeds, Michael Crawford. Michael brings a wealth of experience to this conversation with a background in psychology, education, and strategic partnerships. As a leader of America Succeeds Durable Skills Initiative, he's at the forefront of reshaping how we think about essential non-technical skills in education and the workplace. With degrees from the University of Michigan, Michigan State, and a PhD in educational psychology from the University of Kansas, Michael's academic journey reflects his deep commitment to understanding human development and learning. His diverse professional experience includes roles at VILA and Western Governors University, and it's given him a unique insight into the intersection of education, technology, and the future of work. Today, we dive deep into learning how schools are overcoming challenges to put a refined emphasis on durable skill development as they make shifts to competence-based education models. We talk about how leaders can develop a culture of learning and growth to bring about real change, and how we can triangulate the support to ensure our students are successful for their futures. Now, to my conversation with Michael Crawford. Michael, it's so great to have you on today's show. Thank you, first and foremost, for spending some time with us and sharing all of your insights. To kick things off, Michael, how you been over the past couple of weeks? What's been going on?
Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate the opportunity. Last few weeks have been a wild ride. I have two young kids, and so we're gearing up and getting back to school. This is, I think, day 3 of school, which is exciting. But yeah, the last several weeks, winding down summer, no more travel, soccer practice kicking in, just gearing up for another school year.
Love to hear it. And speaking of the school year, I know we're kind of foreshadowing a little bit. We're going to be talking a lot about school, and we're going to be talking a lot about great work in durable skills and frameworks and stuff like that. But Michael, just talk to us really quickly about your background in education and the journey you've taken to where you are today.
Absolutely. So both my parents are public school educators. I had no aspirations of following in their footsteps. I had always wanted to make a positive impact on people. That was what I was more concerned with, not necessarily being a teacher. In college, I was interested in people and understanding how they make decisions and how I can potentially help them make better decisions. I was of the opinion, and I'm still am of the opinion, that I think human beings leave a lot on the table. And I think there are, myself included. And I think we could be better. And so I wanted to be in the get better business, whatever that meant. Fast forward a bunch, I worked for a youth soccer governing body and saw how coaches and parents were really having an impact on young people, and in particular a negative impact in a lot of different ways. And I wanted to better understand how to fix that specifically. I was an athlete when I was younger and had great support from parents and coaches, but that isn't and wasn't the case for a lot of the young folks I was seeing. And so I pursued a master's degree in sports psychology, focused on youth sports and coaching in particular. Recognized quickly that sports is one context for youth development, and became more aware that other kinds of contexts contribute to youth development in meaningful ways. And so needed to kind of expand the way that I thought about that and what I knew about youth development and how these spaces help and hinder young people's development. And so pursued a PhD in educational psychology, really focused on development, adolescent development in particular, and non-formal learning environments. So the sort of non-traditional, not just sitting in a classroom and getting information, but what kinds of experiences contributed to the way that young people think and grow. And so earned a PhD in ed psych from the University of Kansas. And I was off. Started working in a range of different organizations. I worked at the Kauffman Foundation, focused on their Kauffman Scholars Program, worked at nonprofits, tried to launch an ed tech startup, worked at a higher ed institution, and really started to see the kinds of experiences, the way that technology contributed to human development, what role policy plays in shaping and kind of creating the environment for young people to learn and grow and ultimately, hopefully, become more effective and capable and healthy and thriving adults. Today, so fast forward, over a decade, today I'm VP of Strategic Initiatives at America Succeeds, which is a nonprofit based in Denver, and we work at the intersection of the workforce and education. And so what we're really trying to do is kind of be that business voice in the education space and hear from and learn from and listen to where all of us aim to go in some capacity, probably. The workforce, whether we're entrepreneurs or we work for other folks, we really tried to America Succeeds tries to understand what it is that they are looking for, what it is that they want and maybe aren't getting, and then take that learning and knowledge and collide it with education systems to hopefully create the kinds of conditions that lead young people to more flourishing and wholesome lives. So that's the fast version of where I've been for the last 15 or so years.
Yeah, and Michael, we'll definitely circle back to some of the work you're doing with America Succeeds. I just find it really interesting hearing your story, how you come from a family of public school educators. It was not the pathway you envisioned for yourself, but you wanted to get into the get better business, which to me is such a through line to how do you help people get better? You become a teacher. And it was really interesting how that sort of helped shape your journey a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, it was never really my thinking. I appreciated very much my K-12 experience. I saw my parents. My dad was a high school math teacher and coach. My mom was an elementary PE teacher and coach. And so I saw the work that they did, the time that they put in, the impact that they had, kids coming up to my mom in particular at the grocery store and, or like pulling on their parents, shirt and saying, "Hey, that's my teacher." So I saw the impact that good educators and education can have. I think I always felt like I wanted to kind of zoom up a level or two. And if I could have an impact on the system level, then the educators on the ground that were actually interfacing with young people could be better positioned to serve them.
Yeah.
And so rather than, maybe having 100 students a year and having a really tremendous impact on them, if I could impact a system of thousands, that might be a better way to have a broader impact. So that's kind of how I had always thought about it. I wasn't an education major. And so, I was curious about the ways in which people develop, and school and education is one of those ways. It's not the only way, but that's kind of the way that I got into that kind of get better business.
Yeah, I think it's an important call out that, people can develop and grow, and it's not always just in the education field itself. But I do love the idea of the collision of kind of what America Succeeds is all about. And speaking of, I'm very fortunate. I know a little bit about America Succeeds, but for the listeners that are here, can you just help us better understand, what America Succeeds is doing on a daily basis? And as well, I'm curious, Michael, kind of how this aligns, like how do you align to the mission of what America Succeeds is all about?
Yeah, so I have, as I mentioned, kind of seen education from a range of different vantage points, different roles, different perspectives. Done a lot of reading and been to conferences and workshops and lots of conversations about the broader education system, and so when I got the opportunity to join America Succeeds, it just felt like a great fit for me. America Succeeds, as I mentioned, Denver-based nonprofit, focused at that intersection of education and the workforce. One thing I didn't mention about my background, I worked for the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City and kind of got bit a bit by the entrepreneurship bug. And so, not as a business person by, I don't know, aspiration or even by training in any kind of way, learned about entrepreneurship, learned about the kinds of learnings, benefits, outputs, et cetera, that folks with a more business and employment and entrepreneurial mindset bring to the table. And so I kind of had some experience on both sides of the fence, on that kind of business, employer, workforce side, as well as on the education side. What we do at America Succeeds, it's been around for about 10 years. It initially started with a more policy focused agenda, really trying to help improve and enhance the education system via policy that was informed by business voices, business leaders, et cetera. Over the last 4 years or so, we have been much more focused on the term we coined durable skills. And so over the last 4 years, prior to the last 4 years, we heard from businesses all the time that they were having challenges finding professionals, finding workers, employees that had the kinds of skills that they needed in order to thrive as businesses. And so we heard that over and over again. We started seeing data come in around skills gap and around unfilled positions. And so we started doing some research. We started looking at, well, what are these skills? What are they looking for that they're not getting? We looked at a bunch of different taxonomies and frameworks and identified what we coined, again, durable skills, which you can think of as, you hear there's a million different terms: soft skills, 21st century skills, essential skills. Essentially, these are the skills that last a lifetime and are kind of industry and role agnostic. So these are communication, creativity, critical thinking, growth mindset, things that are relevant regardless of where you work and what kind of work you do. And so we really started to dive in on that work and better understand it. We partnered with MZ Burning Glass, which is Lightcast, to do a scan, 80 million jobs analyzed to better understand what kinds of skills employers were looking for. And it turns out 8 of the top 10 were durable skills. And then we took that and took those findings, worked with over 800 different industry professionals, educators, other kinds of employers from all kinds of industries, large and small, to create a framework, a shared lexicon for educators, for education leaders, for learners, for prospective employees, for employers, to all be able to speak the same language. So I got ahead of myself a little bit, but America Succeeds is really focused on helping all learners and earners develop those kinds of skills, be able to articulate those skills, be able to understand how they are showing up with those skills and those mindsets in order to enhance and increase economic mobility for themselves, their families, their communities, and beyond. And so that's the kind of work that America Succeeds has been doing for 10 years or more, and even more specifically around durable skills over the last 4 or so.
And it's an incredibly noble mission, because we're hearing every single day from our school district partners that they are reshaping their strategic plans. They're reshaping how they're instructing students to be focused on durable skill development. And there's a lot of names for it. We see portrait of a learner, portrait of a graduate, profile of a learner, all these different versions of it. But at the end of the day, it's really leaning into that durable skill development. And Michael, I really appreciate that you called out that it's not just to better support that student, but that this is going to be something that's impacting the community, it's impacting the family, it's impacting the present and the future. And that as you are developing this work, we're really starting to look at how is this going to kind of reshape our education system as a whole.
Yeah, I think mentioning and bringing up and emphasizing portrait of a learner, portrait of a graduate, et cetera. I think, they have been around for a little while. They are absolutely gaining ground these days. For those who may not know, portraits of a learner, portrait of a graduate are, they can be at the state level, they can be at the district level, at the school level. They're essentially a description of the kinds of attributes, skills, qualities, dispositions that when young people leave the K-12 school system, when they leave high school, when they graduate, these are the kinds of things that they should know and be able to do, which is a departure from most of education history in the U.S. and I would imagine elsewhere that focused on and prioritized academics. And it isn't the case that academics don't matter. Of course, reading, writing, being able to do math, a lot of different literacies that are developed through an academic focus, very valuable, no question about it. However, for a long time, that had been the only priority. That had been the main focus of what school systems aim to do. And I think with the emerging growth of portraits, it opens the door for more, for different priorities, for an expansion of what young people should be able to know and do after they leave high school. And it makes sense. We human beings are complex. We are much more than test scores, or much more than math scores specifically, or English scores, or reading, etc. We contain multitudes, some, I think, who was it, Whitman? Somebody famous said that, and that's absolutely true. But the education system hasn't really reflected that or supported that. And so I think what portraits are beginning to allow for are the expansion, the prioritization of different kinds of skills, different ways of being, different, some of them are focusing on global competencies. Some of them are incorporating technology in new and different kinds of ways. Most of them, as far as I know, don't not include academic goals and academic accomplishments, but they all do include things that are beyond academics. And durable skills are absolutely part of that. I mean, I think, no person, all right, another way to say it is, everybody who has ever been hired has been hired for both technical and non-technical skills. And for the longest time, our systems have put their thumb on the scale of the technical side or the academic side. And again, I think these days, and it will continue to expand and continue to grow, which I think is a good thing, towards a more holistic, more whole child, more well-rounded young person. And there are downstream implications, right? So one of the things that we're seeing with portraits gaining the kind of ground they're gaining is that it has the potential to change and shape what teaching and learning looks like in schools. There's an adage, I believe, attributed to Peter Drucker, that what gets measured gets managed. I think it's a misquote, but he's the one that gets credit for it. But it's this idea that if what the outcome everybody is seeking is, let's say, something academic, then what it looks like in classrooms day to day prioritizes academics.
Right.
However, conversely, if what is focused on, if the outcome is a wider range of different kinds of learnings and different kinds of skills, etc., then it means that different kinds of pedagogical approaches can be woven into the classroom. It means that different kinds of assessments and assessment regimes and understanding what measurement of learning even means can be brought into classrooms in more systemic ways. And again, maybe a quick aside: these are not necessarily new concepts. They have existed in Montessori spaces or homeschooling spaces or other kinds of self-directed learning environments. They exist in certain kinds of project-based offerings. These are not just new things whole cloth. Instead, they are just gaining in importance because of the kinds of outputs, the kinds of experiences, the kinds of learnings that come from them, which, in my opinion, is a good thing.
And I think I love how, as you're kind of explaining this, calling out that doing durable skill development is not new. But what I am hearing and seeing so often is that with this larger emphasis on portraits or profiles is we're now putting a name to something, and that prioritization is leading to transformation. And the biggest output that we're seeing is students starting to really tie academic content and knowledge to real world applications for something that's bigger than what they may have seen in the past. And I love how you're talking about the positive output and what it's doing to our leaders. It's having them take a refocus, take a step back and actually examine, how are we measuring growth? What is the pedagogy strategies that we're actually implementing? And again, it's not new, but it's bringing upon such a refined focus. So I'm curious, as you describe, you're seeing lots of shifts taking place, Mike. Like, what sort of shifts do you see happening as this new refined focus on durable skills and the output is being brought into our schools?
Yeah, I think a few different things. First, educators and school leaders, district leaders, other folks that have worked in the space are well aware that a sole focus on academics is never, that isn't the key. Educators know this. School leaders know this. Many educators and school leaders who are doing creative and entrepreneurial things to help young people have different kinds of experiences and learn different kinds of things. If they have leadership that is okay with with breaking the mold a little bit or deviating, they stick around. Unfortunately, too often, educators who see the value of a more holistic approach, a more durable skills-based approach, but they're being required to stay the course, oftentimes leave the profession, which is incredibly disappointing, but it makes sense. I think there's a couple shifts I think that we're seeing. I think one is at the educator or school level, we're seeing different kinds of pedagogical approaches. So we've been doing some research with high schools that are helping young people develop durable skills. They are prioritizing the development of these kinds of skills. Sometimes they call it durable skills, sometimes they call them professional skills or essential skills, but we're talking about the same thing for the most part. And what they are doing, the shifts they're making, are around assessment and grading. They're thinking differently about the A, B, C, D, E, F grading system. They are taking into account different kinds of evidence of learning instead of standardized tests or quantitative ways of understanding whether a young person is at a 72 or a 59 or whatever it may be. They're looking at they're using different kinds of performance rubrics. They're using different ways of reflection and self-assessment for young people, which kind of leads into another shift that is becoming more prominent, which is a shift towards young people having more ownership, taking more ownership over their educational experience, over their learning, over their outcomes, which to me, with some training and background in adolescent development, I think is one of the most exciting aspects of this. Have thought and talked and kind of read for a long time about the importance of what I would say is owning your own learning and owning your own life. Ultimately, we all as individuals are driving our own bus, and the sooner we're able to recognize that, the sooner we're able to make choices that are actually in service of ourselves and our humans and our bodies and our goals, as opposed to it being kind of outsourced to the adults around us. I think a competency-based approach, I think portraits, I think a focus on these kinds of skills are making it clearer to young people that, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to just do the game of school. If I'm interested in robots or butterflies or the Revolutionary War, and I can do work and do research and connect with people who are experts in this, or build things that are associated with the topic that I'm interested in, and I can, quote, get credit for it in my school environment. Wow, like that's amazing. That's a different kind of student that shows up. They have agency, they have autonomy, they have an aspiration that they can connect to their day-to-day. That's a very different kind of learner, a very different kind of person. I think for most people, for most young people in particular, they live too often having their kind of agency, autonomy, the energy to wake up and do exciting things be provided from the outside. And ideally, hopefully, I think schools they don't want that to be the case. They want to share and kind of give over power and responsibility to young people. But the systems, the structures of schools today don't make that easy. And I think things like portraits, things like competency-based approaches, project-based approaches begin to kind of crack that structure a little bit, open up little areas for young people to be like, oh wow, I didn't even know I could do that. And now with AI and other kinds of tools that are emerging in more prominent ways, they have the resources. They don't have to fully rely on the adults or the system or the school or their parents to pursue things that actually light them up. And that, that's, I don't know how, I'm sure there are economists and other creative people that can try to explain the impact of what that shift in mindset for a young person, for a learner can be. I don't know how to do that. But I think that's a massive gain that, societies, countries, communities will begin to see, is when young people start to come alive and really embrace their power and their capacity. That's a really exciting prospect.
I think it's really important, as we're talking about this refined view. It's allowing school districts to connect to student voice in ways that they may otherwise not have done. And we're seeing some really amazing shifts happen. I mean, as you're kind of describing the student linking into their passion and leveraging that to showcase their mastery, it just makes me think of some of the movement happening, for example, out of Washington State and their new performance-based graduation pathway, where it's all about, hey, you're a student, you're passionate about something, you can actually use this as a vehicle to go through and graduate in a non-traditional way, not just taking the standardized tests, but leveraging your content mastery through something of a passion. And, there's tons of really amazing examples that are coming out of those school districts that is a really unique way. But what I'm hearing, Michael, is it just, by empowering that student, it's just making them want to be in the building. It's making them want to engage in a way that they might otherwise not have. And we know that there are big challenges that school districts are facing about getting students into those buildings. And I often just think, well, if they're interested in what it is that they're going through in a way that is personalized to them, they're going to want to be there because it's engaging them in a way that they otherwise were not. So I think, taking a look at that is a simple way in theory to engage those students, right?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And it's fun, I don't know, cool, exciting that you mentioned Washington. One of the schools that is part of our research practice collaborative research project, the project focused on high schools helping young people develop these kinds of skills. The project, we were focused on what kinds of design elements, what are the structures, what are the ways that they're thinking about assessment and evaluation. Do they have a project-based approach? How do their young people, how do the students understand the experience they're having, et cetera? That's kind of what the project is focused on. And I can talk more about that in a minute. But one of the schools that we studied and are working with as a partner in this project is a school called Gibson Eck High School, outside of just outside of Seattle.
We love Julia. She's a guest on the show.
Awesome. Yeah. So here your listeners are probably familiar. But the work that they are doing, the structure that they've put in place, they've absolutely leveraged and benefited from the kind of policy landscape in Washington to create an environment where young people get to drive their own learning in ways that just don't tend to happen in schools. And these are young people who are part of the district and who have heard about Gibson Eck and see the different way that they approach school. Very project-based. Young people and adults are co-creating and co-teaching what they call design labs. They're in internships 2 days a week for all 4 years. They have a competency-based approach to their work and to their growth and tracking and assessment. It is always the school that I point to as I don't know, the gold standard in this kind of work. And not every school, every school has its own uniqueness. They have their own context. They're bringing their own stuff to the table. They're in different communities that have different priorities. They're in different states that have different guidelines. So not every school needs to be Gibson Eck in order to provide young people with these sorts of experiences. And there are things that we can learn from places like Gibson Eck and others that we can take back to our home districts, our schools, and figure out how to weave it in and figure out, are there ways to shift how we're thinking about assessment? Are there technology tools that can actually help educators better connect with young people and build stronger relationships? Are there project structures or different kinds of reflection opportunities that other schools are using that we can build into our school in order to reap the benefits of those kinds of interactions? And so, Washington has created some amazing conditions for schools to get creative, and Gibson Eck is one of those.
Yeah, they're doing some really, really amazing work. And for the listeners that are out there, check them out. Just Google Gibson X School and you'll be able to see some really amazing profiles. But I think, Michael, from a leadership perspective, all it takes is a creative leader to want to do amazing things. And, there's schools all across the US that are branching out and doing this work. To call out a school specifically, Alvin C. York Agricultural Institute, and now they're out in Tennessee, and they're doing some really cool work within the guidelines of the state policy. And they have an amazing agricultural program where they have a farm to table initiative happening within their building, where they actually are, from insemination, they are leading the journey, and the students are facilitating the entire pathway to then go back into their community and learn those skills. And they're learning so much about entrepreneurship throughout this journey. And as they go through, they're actually they have a butcher site on campus where the students get to then take the livestock, move them through, and they end off by selling to the school cafeteria, which feeds its whole micro community. So cool. It's amazing. They're doing a really amazing work. So it just makes me think a lot about, kind of in alignment with what Washington and Gibson Eck is doing, is it's in alignment to listening to the community to say, this is what they're doing, this is what we need. But then also just really being creative on how do we align to the interests of our students and provide them with that opportunity of what they want and what they need to then give back. And I think, it just takes a creative leader to listen first and then act.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think there is a recognition that the current way, maybe I'm hopeful here. I'm hopeful that there has been a growing recognition that the current way, the status quo of traditional high school, conventional high school, has limitations that are being there's a spotlight on them, that they're growing. The challenges are growing, I think, if you just continue to do what had been done before. And I think what you're describing, whether it's listening to the community, listening to students, listening to employers, listening to all of those stakeholders and more, and then looking out, right? Stick your head up and take a look at the Gibson X and the other kinds of innovative and creative schools in your state, in your district, in the world. There are examples from all over the place. There are organizations that are sharing on a regular basis great exemplars of places that are doing cool, creative, innovative, more impactful work on behalf of and with young people. There may have been a time back in the day where, you went to school your parents went to school in a certain way. And so then you went to school in a certain way, and then you became a teacher and you are teaching in that same kind of way. And we just don't know better. That's not the case. That is not an acceptable and available excuse these days. There are too many easy to access resources, tools, organizations, workshops, conferences, podcasts, web. I mean, it is endless. And it takes, 10 minutes to take a look around. Go to Education Reimagined, go to Transcend, go to, Aurora Institute. I mean, there are so many examples that any school leader, any district leader can learn from and figure out, okay, I don't look like A, B, or C, but there are parts of A, B, and C that I can incorporate into my work that can make the difference for young people, for communities, for the educators I serve. That's out there, and that's absolutely doable in 2024 and beyond.
And to kind of build on that, Michael, you've identified perhaps a good starting place for a teacher who is about to enter into a new teaching year and thinking, okay, this is the year I'm going to make a change. This is the year I'm going to try something new. But we know that a lot of schools do face real challenges when it comes to bringing about some of these broader shifts. And you've mentioned competency-based learning and those models a few times throughout our conversation today. So talk to us a little bit about, what are some common challenges you hear with schools making this shift? But more importantly, how could either a leader, a school, or an individual teacher actually begin to start making their a shift to these better, more modern practices?
Yeah, I think, so we talked a little bit about, Washington as an example of a policy, like sort of state landscape that creates the opportunity for doing things different. So that's kind of one high level challenge that is real for lots of places. It could mean contacting your legislators. It could mean getting in touch with folks that work at the state DOE. It's not as easy for an individual school leader or educator to move the needle on state policy, by themselves, but there are avenues, there are ways to do that. So that's one thing. If we zoom down a bit and head down towards, the district level or the school level, I think creating a culture of growth and learning, and that, we may not have all the answers or the right answers all the time, but the conditions for seeking those out and trying new things and learning and growing and getting better as a adult professional staff, I think can make a big difference. One of the challenges that I think is difficult to overcome is when we hear the word school, we have a vision in our mind, a conception of kind of what it looks like. And so most young people are moving through a system that looked very similar in lots of ways to the system that their parents and the adults that are teaching them look like. And when those young people become educators themselves, what they know looks like and has looked a certain sort of way. And so one of the main challenges, I think, is overcoming a mindset that this is what school looks like. This is what has to happen. We have to have tests. We have to have grades. We have to have subjects. We have to have, age-based separation between learners, right? So there's these things that we are coming to the table with already in our mind for what school looks like. And I think overcoming that is a challenge in and of itself. Many educators, many school leaders, they may hear of the Gibson X or these sort of examples out, way out in Washington, but that's not what school looks like here. And so, cool for them, good for them, happy for them, but that's not how we do it. That's just not what it looks like. We can't do that, And so I think it's the overcoming of that mindset, I think is really challenging. I think there are, even within existing policy landscapes, and even if you have a mindset of growth, I think there are still real, when rubber meets road, there are real challenges. It could be challenges around resources and professional learning opportunities, professional development. It could be challenges around accessing different kinds of technology that can help facilitate learning in different sorts of ways. The existing, for many people, for many schools, the existing learning management systems that they're using aren't really built to support competencies or projects or skills in these sorts of ways. And so we're starting to see more of those technologies roll out that can help make competency-based, project-based learning more likely. But that's absolutely a constraint. If your learning management system does not make it easy, and you have to do you have to duct tape and baling wire your own kind of system in order to make that happen, that can be a challenge. And so I think that was kind of a bunch in a big pile there. But I think it is, there's state and policy level challenges that can be worked on. I think there's culture, kind of growth, learning kind of challenges that can also be worked on at a more ground level. And then the mindset of educators, of parents. Oftentimes parents don't necessarily know. They had a school experience that looked a certain way, and when a school leader wants to come in and say, "Hey, we're not doing grades anymore, but instead we're going to do mastery-based learning, and we're going to focus on competencies and skills," parents are like, "What do you? I don't like. So is my kid going to pass? Is my kid going to get into college?" There's a lot of things that come up with that, and so the ability to communicate effectively, show evidence, explain how this is actually more beneficial in lots of ways for young people. There's a very important kind of relational communication aspect to this. That's a challenge to be overcome. And so the short answer is there's lots of things that can stand in the way, depending on where you're at, what your community looks like, what your state looks like, what kind of resources you have. There are lots of challenges, and as often is the case, there are creative examples of folks overcoming those challenges that we can learn from.
And I think the most important call out here, Michael, is when we think about leaders creating a culture of learning and growth in their district, because I am a firm believer that when you are aiming to create this culture of learning and growth, that learning isn't just happening within the four walls of the school or the district. That is learning and growth that extends to your community, extends to your families. And as a leader, it's going to allow you to have a sense of vulnerability to say, this is what the community is asking for. We're communicating to you, and we're going to remain accountable by trying new things. And part of this is that we have to reimagine what our grading practices look like. We need to reimagine how we're teaching, and it's not going to happen overnight. And we're going to move through this journey together. It's going to take time, but we are listening, and we are going to make shifts.
Yeah, love that. And that in and of itself is a lesson for young people, for parents, right? I mean, again, historically, teachers and schools have been the experts. They know what to do here. And so we send our kids there. They ingest the knowledge and the information from the people who know it. And that is the best way to help young people be prepared for the future. I think maybe there was a time where that was true. However, I would argue that it's always beneficial for young people to not only be in collision and in partnership with supportive, loving, creative, intelligent adults, sure, but the process of learning and failing and trying things and having to take a step back and taking a step to the side and stubbing our toe or scraping our knee and trying something else and seeing what works and building on that is a process that is beneficial lifelong, whether it's in a professional context or whether it's a project you're working on at home, or for those who are parents working with their own kids, that kind of iterative, design, like those are things that are valuable lessons that apply in all kinds of places. And that's, the world will only continue to lean into that kind of characteristic. It's not the case that some sought after future or some future that is being built right now is going to be much more rote and I just need to learn ABC, and then I go out and find a job that does ABC and I'm good for 20, 30, 40 years, and that's the end of that. That's not the case. Jobs are being created and destroyed at all times. New industries emerge, new learnings show up, from the environment to our own digestion and health and wellness to relation. We are constantly learning. And so in order to be an effective and contributive agent in a world that is constantly evolving and regrowing and regenerating itself, one is best suited to navigate that world if they can do that also. And that currently doesn't really happen in conventional schools. And I think a lot of the things that we're talking about today, whether it's durable skills or whether it's competency-based, project-based, those are the kinds of structures, activities, approaches that are actually that are equipping young people to be aligned for whatever kind of future shows up. And I think that's something we can be excited about.
And we know like the world, the real world is open book. And that's why I'm so excited about these new models coming into play, because it just is allowing us to have that application of knowledge and such a focus on that versus content regurgitation oftentimes. And I can even remember back to my schooling experiences, and it took me to get to post-secondary education where I had one professor. And mind you, this was an orchestration class in my music department. And he gave us all this textbook, and he said, this is your handbook and this is your guidebook that you're going to use for the rest of your life in this field. And I thought that, first of all, is crazy, and I've never been told that ever before. And then he pulled his out, and it was covered in duct tape and it was ripped up, and I thought, this is crazy. And he said, listen guys, the real world is open book, and there are resources. When you watch a TV show and you see the lawyer pull the textbook off to research a case, like that is what the real world is. And it's not about how we can remember a fact. It's about how we can apply what we know to generate new things. And I think, Michael, that's exactly aligning with what you're talking about the real world and how this is shifting what that future could lead to.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's praxis, right? It's research and learning, and then taking that out into the world, and then reflecting and learning, and taking that back out in the world. And it's doing that over and over. And I think, what we're seeing and what the research and the data tend to corroborate is that there is a foundation of durable skills. There is a foundation of attributes and characteristics, mindsets, skills, etc., that will allow you to navigate moving forward in whatever direction you want to go. And in this sort of evolving wild world, the ability to communicate, to be creative, to critically think. Doesn't matter if you're in a music program, or you are the foreman at a construction site, or you're a nurse. Those professions, those industries will shift and evolve. Some will go away, but the ability to connect and communicate with humans, the ability to identify and tackle problems, the ability to persist, right? Like these are things that are kind of industry and kind of disruption proof, future agnostic, that I think are really important. And so that's, again, some of where our work is, and trying to figure out how do we help create education systems that can help build these skills and equip and prepare young people for an evolving and changing future. I mean, it's a fun, exciting, daunting task, And
as we're thinking about this, Michael, from your chair, what advice would you give to leaders who either, they have this vision to make a shift to a competence-based model, or perhaps they are already in a competence-based model but might be struggling to get a little bit of buy-in? Like, what advice would you give to them to help move that needle?
Yeah, I think there's maybe two things come to mind. First is to the first part of your question, which is start looking around, start talking to people, start doing some research. It's a strong skill to have anyway. It's kind of constant, ongoing learning. But there are leaders out there, there are organizations, there are publications, there are plenty of examples to show what it can look like. And then your work as the leader is to take what you've seen and what you've heard and what you've learned and translate it into your context. And I think, so first, start looking around, start talking to people, go to conferences, jump on webinars, listen to podcasts. You leverage social media, find people who seem to be doing things differently and getting different kinds of results, and figure out what that can look like for you. And then secondly, I think it's a communication challenge. It's the ability to show what these different approaches, different models, different ways of thinking can do for the people that you're serving, for the goals that you're trying to hit, for the communities that you live in. I think it's a communication challenge, and it's about bringing folks in. It's about listening. It's about hearing their perspectives, hearing some of the challenges or some of their worries. What are they scared of? What are the kinds of things that are going to make a shift like this less likely or more challenging? And then working to reduce those, working to show, whether it's through data or stories or examples or experimentation. I think there are a lot of tools at the leaders in the leaders toolbox that can be deployed to try to move your team, your school, district, culture, et cetera, towards a direction that actually and more effectively serves young people. So to summarize, I think it's learn, take a look around, explore, do some research, and then I think it's communicate, it's listen, it's share, it's invite. It's those kinds of things that connect human to human, which often helps move the needle.
And to extend on that, historically speaking, so much data collection was leveraged for public accountability. And obviously, standardized testing is a great way to say this is where our students are at and how we can set a benchmark and improve upon it. And as we shift these models, obviously the narrative gets changed. It becomes a lot more anecdotal. How do you, in a data poll, know where students are standing when you're not using that traditional grading model? So I feel like a lot of leaders are challenged in how do we present this information? How do we communicate? And from a lot of the leaders I've spoken to, the largest successes that they're seeing is when they start to remove the walls a little bit and open up that door and say, we're going to invite you in to see, we're going to invite community members to hear from the students, hear those stories. And I think, again, it just kind of takes a little bit of a mindset shift as you learn and grow to research what other districts are doing to invite that community in to see the outcomes, see the output of these models.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are, again, examples of this all over the place, from what are they called? Student-led conferences, SLCs.
Student-led conferences, defensive learning,
demonstrations,
showcases,
gallery walk, all of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, all of those kinds of tools help to, or those approaches help people on the outside who, again, I think for a long time, school has been a version of a black box. We don't, a 92. What actually is a 92? As opposed to, oh wow, let me see your the output of this project. Let me see, you just presented to a room full of 200 people. You showed all the work that you did. You showed where you messed up and how you got better. Maybe there was a rubric or several rubrics that can show how you move from a level 2 to a level 5. And it's not just abstract quantitative jargon. It's actually, oh, this is what you could do, and this is what you can do now. And adults, professional adults, parents, etc., can see that and understand the changes. And so I'm totally with you. Making some of that work more transparent, inviting people in, engaging communities, parents, etc. I think those are great ways to do it.
Michael, as we're getting ourselves set to wrap up here, why do you see this refined focus on durable skills becoming so prominent in the future of our K-12 education system?
I think for a while, the existing way met some or maybe many of the needs of the individuals themselves. They could leave with a high school diploma, they could get a bachelor's degree, they could get a job, and they could cruise on to, in this country at least, the American dream. I think the conditions have shifted a bit, and I think it has forced folks to revisit what preparation means, what education means, what learning in school all of those kind of like pre-professional, we'll say, experiences. It's forced us to look back and say, what we were doing used to work, we think, and today it doesn't. And so not only today it doesn't work, but moving forward, it's even less likely to work. So we need to revisit how we have approached equipment, preparation, support, education, etc. I think durable skills in particular are the kinds of skills, the kinds of competencies that, regardless of the way that the economy shifts, regardless of the industries that grow and die, regardless of the technology that gets developed and continues to grow, these are the sort of human, essential durable skills that will last. And I think schools that are working towards incorporating these into their systems more effectively and more kind of ubiquitously, I think are going to be the ones where young people who are in those systems and leave those systems are going to be the ones that thrive. They are going to be the ones that are able to build on those skills. They're able to adapt to circumstances changing, to needs of the world and their families, et cetera, changing. And it's those young people with those particular skills who are going to when the tide starts rising, they're going to be the one that continues to stay above it. And I think things like portraits, things like competency-based ed, some of the other things that we've talked about today are kind of the gateways into some of those shifts we're talking about. And I'm hopeful that they'll continue to grow, and more young people will continue to be able to create the lives that they seek.
Meeting the needs of all our students, not just some, so that they can all lead to a successful future. Michael, thank you so much for being on the show here today and for sharing so much insight into the work that America Succeeds is doing, but also how our leaders can make these broader shifts to make sure that all of our students are successful for the future.
Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate it.
That was competency-based education advocate and VP of Strategic Initiatives with America Succeeds, Michael Crawford. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the show. And make sure you hit the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. I'm Jordan Lewis, and you've been listening to the Growth Over Grades podcast.